Right, thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you. So I'm just going to basically dovetail on what Angus has been saying. Fibre quality is a very, very big subject, and as you've heard, there's lots of complications and stuff, and if we have to really talk about fibre quality in depth, we'll be here the whole day. So I'm just going to really sort of highlight a few of the things that Gus has spoken about, maybe just expand on them a little bit. I think I'm a cotton spinner by trade. So I started in the spinning industry, and I think it's important to know what are sort of the most important fibre properties from a spinner's perspective. And here we're talking about the physical fibre properties. So obviously length is important, the strength is important, the fineness is important. So fineness, in our talk, fineness is micronair, and then the cleanliness, so the trash. And there you can see we've got ring spinning, rotor spinning, and air jet spinning. Those are the three major different spinning systems in the world. The majority of the Australian cotton is spun on the ring spinning system, which produces the highest quality yarns. So our cotton is sort of in the high end, and so obviously the spinners would use that to produce high-end yarns. Now, number 5 there, I put other in red, and other things like colour. Now, I didn't add colour in the beginning because colour from a physical perspective for a spinner is not important. Whether the colour is a bright white or a yellow or something like that, from a spinner's perspective for the processing, the colour doesn't matter. The colour matters for different reasons. Then we talk about the stickiness, we talk about contamination, which is something very important that we in Australia really have to be careful of, and then stickiness as well. So just to sort of give an idea of what sort of fibre parameters the spinners are looking at, and don't expect you to sort of remember those values too much. So John will talk about how this is tested, and Pete will say how that sort of fits in the marketing thing. So we've got the 3 different types of fibre of cotton that we have. So the extra long staple, that's the Pima. So here in Australia we don't process any Pima, so you forget about that one. The first one is the upland cotton. So Australia basically produces just standard upland cotton. But over time, if you look at the data from CSD and so on, we'll see that the fibre length is slowly but surely becoming longer. So we're actually moving from the upland cotton, we're moving more into the ELS side of things. So that's what we call a long staple upland cotton. So if we want to move into that sort of sphere and obviously get more money for our cotton, the parameters that are required are a little bit tighter than what the parameters are at the moment. So the ones that are on the blue is sort of the what we call the base grade. That's what the cotton is that the growers will get paid on, discounted on, and penalised on, and what the spinners will actually also specify. I'm not going to go too much in those sort of parameters. Or just sort of the main thing is as I said, the length, the strength, the micronair, the grade, in other words, the colour, and the trash. It's interesting that although from a physical perspective, the grade or the colour is not the most important for a spinner, in terms of the cotton price, the colour is the biggest component of the cotton price, which is sort of quite an interesting thing, which I'm sure Pete might talk about a little bit about later. Okay, so I think it's important, listen to what Gus was saying. I think it's very important that we realise that the in-field and harvesting decisions play an important role on determining the fibre and seed quality, as the quality of the gin cotton is directly related to the quality of the cotton prior to ginning. There seems to be a misconception that the gins are the ones that will determine what the quality is. The gins can either only improve it or they can actually make it detrimental. And I think that's a very important thing to remember. And this is the thing. So the cotton gin, in essence, is there just to remove the trash. Number 1. And number 2 is to remove the seed from the lint. That's in essence, what the gin does. The gin can't do anything about the micronair. The gin can't really do anything about the colour. It can make it a little bit. If the colour is borderline, it can maybe improve it slightly by taking out the trash, but it doesn't influence the colour. The gin doesn't influence the strength. The gin can negatively influence the length. If we have too much trash in it and we have to put too many machines in it to take the trash out, that will be detrimental to the fibre. So we have what we call the ginning compromise. So it's a compromise of the amount of trash that goes in as opposed to the quality that you want. The gin can take out all the trash that you want, but in the same time it will reduce the fibre length, it will have higher short fibre content, it will have higher nep, it will have a lower turnout, and the gin will have a lot more trash to have to play with. So that's, in essence, what's very important that we understand, that things that you do in field and during the harvesting plays a major role in the quality. That determines what the quality of the fibre is going to be. The gin can only slightly improve it, but it can also make it really detrimental. And there is just some further sort of things to highlight, that the more cleaning stages that you put into in the gin, so if you give a cotton to the gin that's very high on trash, you've had issues with defoliation, you've had high trash, or the cotton is very moist, and the gin has to put a lot of heat on it, or has to put a lot of machinery in it to get rid of the trash, the consequences are it will influence your staple length, it will influence the grade, it will influence also from a spinner's perspective. So it's very important that we understand that the infield considerations that you do, what Gus has explained, and harvesting plays a major role in the quality of the fibre. So just to sort of further expand on what Gus has been saying about the different parameters, when we talk first about grade, so here we're talking about colour and trash grade, the combination. What affects the colour grade and the trash grade? Well, number one, it's very interesting that the cotton that's basically grown in the southern hemisphere, so cotton that's grown during the summer, is generally whiter than cotton that's grown in the northern hemisphere. So that's why the cotton in Australia is very bright, very light. It's the same as cotton from South Africa, where I'm from, and Zimbabwe, where I'm from too, are also very white, whereas the cotton in America, which is grown in the northern hemisphere, which is grown during winter, is more yellower. Okay, so that's the one thing. Obviously, the crop maturity, so if the cotton is not mature, as Gus has been talking about, that can influence the colour. If we have a lot of rain events and the cotton is exposed to a lot of rain and it doesn't dry, it can affect the colour. The variety, so if you plant a variety that's maybe a long maturing variety and you have a short season, the cotton doesn't mature properly, that can influence the colour of the fibre as well. The ginning can only influence the trash grade. So if you have some marginal cotton, the gin can slightly improve by taking out some of the bad cotton. It can also, if you have spotted cotton, can take some of the spot out, can remove the trash. But as you can see, that's only a very small proportion of the other influences of the grade. Factors affecting fibre length. The major one is variety. So you've got to choose a variety. I know a lot of people choose variety because of the yield, and that's great. But you also must realise that the variety choice that you're doing also influences your fibre quality. And whatever variety you choose, you've got to make sure that you choose the right variety for your area, for the environmental conditions, for what's forecast for the season and so forth. And then other ginning obviously makes, as Gus was saying, the more machines you have to put in, it will damage the fibre. It will reduce the length of the fibre. And you'll have what, as Gus was saying, short fibre content. So short fibre content is fibres that are shorter than 12.5 millimetre or shorter than ½ an inch. And from a spinner's perspective, it reduces processing performance. So we're talking about this part here. So when the fibre actually goes into the gin, in theory, it's all the same length. And so the more stages you put the fibre through, the more it will reduce the length. So in theory, you could have cotton going in, which is maybe a 38, and you only get a 36 out, and you have a high short fibre index. Now, if that's the price that you're willing to pay to make sure that the grade is correct, that's I suppose, your choice. But from a spinner's perspective, short fibre content is a problem. Factors affecting micronair, again, Gus has spoken about that. Variety is a big one. And then we have other. Other is temperature, as he's explained. So, I mean, as we saw last year, there were quite a lot of discounts, or in the low end, like micronair, and that's due just because of the weather. So we didn't get the day degrees the same this year. We're slightly behind. So hopefully, with the hot weather that we're having lately, the crop can catch up to the day degrees, and we might not have the same amount of low mark as what we had last year. And this is particularly a problem down south, because we have a very closer to the Victorian border, smaller window to grow crops, smaller window for the crops to become mature. So low micronair is a problem. And micronair is an interesting beast because micronair is actually a combination of fiber density and maturity. So so in our instance, the low mic comes from that the cotton is more immature. Immature cotton, as he has said, forms those little knots there, and that's okay if you're wearing denims. As he was saying, it doesn't take up the same amount of dye. You can see the white flecks and the white spots, which is great. But if you're buying a $250 Pierre Cardin shirt, which is the color that I have, and you've got white specks on it, you're not going to be happy. And so from a spinner's perspective, that is very much a no-no, and that's something that they really look at. And Australia has had, in the past, a little bit of a reputation for higher NEPs due to the amount of cleaning that we put our cotton through. Fortunately, it's not on the, doesn't form part of the contracts or anything like that, but it's all about reputation. If a country gets a reputation for high NEP or a short fibre content or stickiness or contamination, that's going to influence what spinners are going to be prepared to pay for your cotton. Factors affecting fibre strength, the main factor is variety. So again, variety choice is very important. And then also environmental conditions. Stickiness is something that Gus also mentioned. So this is the International Textile Manufacturing Federation. They do surveys every 2 years. So they contact a lot of spinners across the world and ask them a lot of questions about, how do you rate Australian cotton in terms of stickiness? And they look at all sort of crops around the world. And this is sort of from 1989. And if you look at the world as the blue, so what that blue one means is that if you look at 1989, what that blue one means is in the spinners, so this is perception, doesn't actually mean that it's accurate, but perception is reality. So if you look at 1989, what the spinners are saying worldwide, that 21% of all the cotton produced worldwide in the spinner's perception is sticky. And in that same year, they were saying that 6% of all Australian cotton produced was sticky. Okay? And we can see we had so we've got a bit of a checkered history. You can see there in 1997 or 99, the spinners were saying that 34% of all Australian cotton was sticky. And so, yeah, it's going up and down. And so in 2022, so that was last year, so we had 0. So that's good. So, yeah, but it's bouncing around. So you can see what's happening worldwide. There's a steady drop, whereas ours is bouncing around a bit. And I think if you go back to the seasons, you can probably work out very hot seasons generally tend to have whitefly. And also there's lots of studies shown that the amount of N, if you're increasing N, that actually there's a correlation between nitrogen and stickiness. And I suppose if you think about it, so if you put a lot of N and you have these big bushes, so they become very appetizing to the aphids and stuff to go there. So moisture is something else that's very important. Most of us are using the John Deere round module harvesters, and just because they can pick for 24 hours, it doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do. 12% should generally be the cutoff point, although the ginners would really prefer 10%. And the reason for that is that obviously the more moisture that's in the modules, the gins have to. Before I get to that, just some examples, which I'm sure these are extreme, of course. But last season, this is what we've seen. There's numerous accounts of gins showing information where they've had round modules coming with 22% moisture. And you'll think, well, that's just, doesn't happen very often. Well, yes, it has happened. Specifically last year, we know it was a wet season. So, yeah, and obviously there's a danger of these modules catching fire. So the consequences, basically what happens is that the gin has to slow down. So this is just an example in the trials that we did, where under normal conditions, this gin was running at 50 barrels an hour, and the moisture was above 12%, it went down to 40, and then above 14% went down to 30. And there you can see that the issue, that was all 51s and 41s, and that also causes issues with the seed. Now, fortunately, and I'm on the executive of the Australian Cotton Ginners Association, fortunately, so the gins are slowing down their production to be able to gin it. They're using a lot more gas, and in most cases, this extra cost that the gins are encountering is not being passed down to the growers. But at some stage, the gins are not going to be able to wear that anymore, and they're going to have to pass it on. So, you know, it's very important to bear that in mind. Contamination, major issue. So one of the major, and I don't know what Pete's going to talk about later, but one of the major reasons why Australian cotton gets a premium, yes, the fibre quality is good, but one of the major reasons is that we perceive to be contamination free. That's where the majority of our premium comes from. And that's why it's very important then to maintain it. So we've got these round modules that are coming into our system now. So one round module has got 23 metres of plastic on it. So last year we had about 1.5 million round modules in the country. So if you do the maths, it's about 30 million metres of plastic that we've introduced into our cotton production pipeline. If you look, so again, this is what the spinners say. So at the top is worldwide. So in 2022, the spinners are saying that in their opinion, 22% of all the cotton produced worldwide is it's got contamination in it. And in Australia, they say 5%. And if you look at the data, most of that or all of that is plastic. Many years ago when we had the conventional modules, it would be metal and cell phones and all that sort of stuff, but these days it's plastic. And I'm sure you've driven around the gin yards and you've seen these sort of modules. And here you can see in the cotton gin and the module feeder where the modules go in, plastic wrapped around the beaters, and you actually see in our classing houses as well, they've caught it as well. So plastic is a problem. So there are now a lot of other plastic manufacturers out there. It was previously just Tama, and now there are others that are being sold, and that's great. It's good to have options, but I urge you to be careful with the choice of plastic that you do. Just because it's cheaper doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do, specifically if you've got to haul your cotton, you know, for a couple of 100 kilometres, and you've got to put them in these bird cages and so forth. Be careful of the choice that you make, because once it gets like this to the gin will do their best and utmost to get rid of it. But if you've got something like this, you know, there can be a lot of times the gin is not going to see that. And you also have to remember that a round module like that in a cotton gin, 4 minutes, it's gone. So we produce a cotton bale, one cotton bale in every gin, 45 seconds. So you have to remember that, you know, what's the delay time? How quickly can a gin react or not react? That's very important to remember. So if there's any plastic in there, some gins will see it and they'll stop and they'll do whatever they need to do. Others won't see it. And so this plastic on this module beater here could be on there for hours. So if a gin is producing 80 or 90 bales an hour and that plastic is on there, potentially those bales can be contaminated. What's even worse is, say, this is from one grower. They do a grower change, and the next grower goes in. So that contamination from the previous grower, because it's still on the beat, is going to contaminate the next grower. So it's not just, you know, one grower or the other. It could be whole gin runs. So something to really take note of. And with that, I think, as I said, there's lots to talk about, but I think I'll leave it there. Happy to take any questions or comments or.
Immature fibre.
Yep.
Low mic. Not necessarily a set relationship though, is it? You can have low mic and immature fibre.
No, it's not necessarily. So I mean, so our G5 range, which is the 3.5, starts at 3.5, is sort of low. Anything below that gets discounted. But a 3.5 fibre can actually be a mature fine fibre. But with the current way that we're testing it, we can't actually differentiate. So from the spinner's perspective, they have learned that, you know, anything below a 3.5 is low mic and it's going to cause issues, so they don't want to touch it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So we don't have the instrumentation at the moment to separate fineness and maturity.
So potentially, though, if we could, would that fibre be a thing to work with?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Because all Australian cotton is used for fine, high quality stuff. So the finer the fibre. So the thing with micronair is all about the minimum fibres in the cross section. So a spinner will be able to determine what yarn he can produce by the fineness of the fibre. So if the fibre is finer, you can produce a finer yarn. If the fibre is coarse, you can produce, say, a denim, for example. So yeah. But at the moment, there's no differentiation.